hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining me for this video, and if you're new here, my name is Grace and I love plants. Today we're going to talk about my go-to potting mix for my houseplants. If you're interested to learn how to make your own, then keep on watching. Just quickly before we get started though, I do post videos every week, so make sure you're subscribed and ring the notification bell so you don't miss my future uploads. And without further ado, let's get into it. I've been growing indoor plants for around about 2 years now, and I've experimented with all sorts of different substrates, from sphagnum moss to leca to rocky mixes, and of course, soil. There are pros and cons to each, but for today, I'm just going to be focusing on my go-to soil mix. Now, you may be wondering why some people choose to mix their own soil as opposed to using store-bought potting mix. Personally, I choose to mix my own soil for various reasons. Number one, it allows me to better cater to the specific needs for my plants. And secondly, it helps to reduce the chances of fungus gnats lurking in the soil. And lastly, it saves me money in the long run as compared to buying bags of soil every time. So for my go-to potting mix, here's what you'll need. 40% coco coir, 20% perlite, 10% peat moss, 10% orchid bark, 10% cocoa chips, 5% horticultural charcoal, and 5% worm castings. So this is what the ratios look like. The first element in my potting mix is this coco coir, and I use this as my moisture retentive substance. Secondly, we have perlite, and this is basically puffed volcanic rock, and it helps with aeration in the soil. Next, I have peat moss, and I use this also for aeration. It's slightly fluffier and lighter than coco coir, and I like to add it in my potting mix as it also helps with moisture retention. Then we have orchid bark and cocoa chips that helps to make the soil mix a little bit chunkier. And then we have the horticultural charcoal that helps with toxin removal. And finally, we have worm castings that acts as a fertilizer or nutrient for this potting mix. Alright, so now let's mix this up. And this is what it should look like when you mix it in. If it doesn't look like that, you can always adjust by adding in the bits and pieces so that it is chunky and fluffy like this. Now, there are a couple of things to consider when you are designing your soil mix. Firstly, you really need to think about the type of plant that you're potting up and also your watering habits. If you're potting up epiphytic plants, meaning plants that tend to grow on trees in the wild like monsteras, philodendrons, and hoyas, they do prefer chunkier and coarser mixes that mimic the surface their roots cling onto in their natural habitat. So in that case, you would increase your percentage of orchid bark and cocoa chips. Whereas ferns and calatheas require more moisture retentive soil to ensure they don't dry out. So in that case, you would increase the percentage of coco coir and peat moss. If you tend to overwater, you'd be better off with more well-draining mix that doesn't retain moisture as well. Conversely, if you tend to underwater, it wouldn't hurt to use more moisture retentive mix and less of the well-draining chunky stuff so your plant can go for longer in between waterings. I'd really recommend you to get to know your plant's needs and your watering habits to be able to design a suitable potting mix for your houseplants. I have a range of plants in my collection, and so I tend to mix my soil accordingly. Also, I'm definitely an underwaterer, so I find a higher percentage of coco coir works well for me. So there you have it, my go-to soil mix. That's it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay mellow, my fellows.